Lesson 1-5, Add and subtract rational numbers. The only difference between this lesson and our previous lessons is that now our numbers are going to include fractions and decimals, whereas before we were only worried about integers. Take a look at your solve and discuss it. See if you can find an easy answer to determine where points A and B could be located so that the difference between them is 120.5 meters. I took the easy route. Since A is below sea level, I made A negative 20.5 meters. And since B is above sea level, I made B a positive 100 meters. Now you might be thinking, well, how do those add up to be 120.5? Remember that this would be a subtraction problem, and the difference between those two distances is 120.5 meters. The essential question in this lesson asks us how are adding and subtracting integers related to adding and subtracting other rational numbers. So one thing that we will do as we are working through this lesson is look to see if our rules for adding and subtracting integers also apply here. Example 1. Lava floats from an active volcano's magma reservoir located below sea level through the magma conduit. How far is the summit of the volcano from sea level? Okay, besides the fact that there were a whole bunch of extra vocabulary words in there that relate to volcanoes, what we're really looking for here is how far apart are the summit of the volcano and where that lava is activated below sea level. Now you'll notice in the picture here that they have identified, oops, sorry about that, let's try that again, that they have identified the distance between the two as 5 1/4 miles. However, the distance below sea level is the 2 3/4 miles. So what we're looking for here is how can we figure out the distance between the summit and sea level? So that's this distance here. There we go. Okay, so one of the things that they teach us to do is to look at this from a number line standpoint. And you can see here on the number line that you've identified, or they've identified a distance, total distance, of 5 1/4 miles. And they've also identified this point right here on the number line at negative 2 3/4 miles, because that's how far below sea level that magma reservoir is located. From negative 2 3/4 on the number line, a distance of 5 1/4, so going up here to 5 1/4, what we're looking for is what is this distance here between the summit and sea level. So how far do I have to go on my number line to get from 0 to where that 5 1/4 miles would end up being after I travel that distance to the summit from that reservoir? So what we actually have here is an addition problem. You can see that right here. And we can use our rules for adding integers and apply them also to rational numbers. So even though there are fractions here, don't freak out. Remember, you just have to get a common denominator when you find when you have to add or subtract fractions or mixed numbers. So you'll see that they've done that. We've made sure that you have common denominators already. You just have to do the fraction computation. So a negative 2 3/4 plus 5 1/4 is a difference of 2 1/2. Remember that this is going to be a positive difference here. Okay, and it's positive because you have more positive value than you have negative value. So we know that the summit of the volcano is 2.5 miles above sea level. Now I'd like for you to complete the try it. See if you can fill in the boxes and use the number line to answer this question, and come back when you're done to check your answer. To help you get started, I've made a point of showing you where negative 4 1/2 feet would be on the number line. Remember, that's the dolphin's location relative to the surface of the water, and the surface of the water would be up here at 0. Okay, and then it tells us that the dolphin swims down another 2 and 3/4 feet. So this is actually going to be a negative 2 and 3/4 feet. And we're going from that negative 4.5 down another 2 and 3/4 feet, and to see where we end up at this point right here. So what we're looking for is to see, where do we actually end up? Okay, pause the video, see if you can finish, and then come back and check your answer. All right, check your work and check your answer. Hopefully you got negative 7 and 1/4 feet when you put together a negative 4.5 plus a negative 2 and 3/4. Now the Convince Me just asks us about how addition and subtraction of rational numbers is related to adding and subtracting integers. Well, to be honest, the rules are the same. So that is one thing that we don't have to worry about changing. So if you can remember how to do it with integers, you definitely know how to do it with rational numbers. You just have to worry about the fractions or the decimals. Take a look at example 2. In this example, you're looking at thrust and gravity as it pertains to a model rocket. The thrust is given to you as a rational number in a mixed number format, 1 1/2 newtons. And the gravity is given to you as a decimal, negative 49/100 newtons. So as you're working to solve this problem and add those two rational numbers together, you're going to have to make sure that you put either the fraction and mixed number into a decimal form or change the decimal into a fraction. The book has selected to change 1 1/2 to 1 5/10 in order to make both of them decimals before subtraction is possible. So the combined force on the rocket is 1 100 newtons. Now I want you to take a look at the three triads. Although they might seem intimidating, I'd like for you to try them and then come back and check your answers. As a helpful hint, for most of these questions, it may be easier to change the fraction into a decimal and then work with the decimal numbers. Take a look at your three answers from the Try It questions and see if they match. If you have questions about what I've done, please ask. In this example 3, we're looking at finding distances on a number line. Remember, a number line can help you see or visualize distances between positive and negative values, which sometimes makes more sense when you're stuck about whether or not your answer should be a positive number or a negative number. So in example 3, it says, Ruby looks over the edge of her boat and sees fish 4/10 of a meter below the surface of the water. If Ruby holds a 1 meter long net at 1/2 meter or 5/10 meter above sea level, can she reach the fish? Explain. Well, they do show us two ways of doing things. One way is to show Ruby's net at a 1/2 meter or 5/10 of a meter above sea level. So that's this on the number line. And right here, it's our first rational number in our absolute value sign. And then to show the depth of the fish, which is at negative 4/10 of a meter, which is 4/10 below sea level. If I find the distance between those numbers, I'm actually subtracting, and then I need to find the absolute value of their difference. So I'm finding the absolute value, which is the distance of their difference. So in the first way, I end up adding 5/10 and 4/10 to get 9/10. And that tells us that Ruby's net and the fish are 9/10 of a meter apart, so a 1 meter long net would be sufficient. The other way is to look at it from the fish's perspective. So if I start with the fish's depth at negative 4/10 and I take away from that the 5/10 of a meter, which is where her net is located, you're actually adding two negative numbers together. Remember, you have your add the opposite here, okay? And once you add the opposite, you get a negative 9/10. But recall that this is still a distance between those 2 points, and distances are always given to us in positive value. We always measure distance as a positive value. So those absolute value bars, which remember are those straight up and down lines, you see them right here and right here. The straight up and down lines tell us about a distance. So the distance is 9/10 of a meter. The direction tells us whether we were moving up or whether we were moving down on that number line. Now I want you to take a look at the try it. You can use a number line to help you, or you can use your scratch paper. See if you can solve the try it and come back in just a minute to check your answer. Take a look at your try it. Two divers are swimming at different depths below sea level. One diver, I'm going to call that diver A, is at negative 25 and 5/10 feet. The other diver, which I'm going to call B, is at negative 40 and 75/100 feet. How much farther below sea level is the diver who is farthest below sea level? So I guess the first thing you need to decide is which diver is lower in the water, diver A or diver B. If you said diver B is lower in the water, you're correct. So what we're looking for here is how much farther below sea level is diver B than diver A. Try this question on your own. Use a number line if you need to, and come back and check your answer when you're finished. All right, so I made a number line for you so you could visualize what was happening, and what we're looking for here is the distance between diver A and diver B. Hopefully you guessed that what you have to do here is subtract these two rational numbers. All right, so the next thing we want to do is to change this from a subtraction problem into adding the opposite. And when I do the opposite of this point A, the opposite of that is a positive 25 and 5/10. So now when you put those two numbers, rational numbers, together using your rules for adding integers, you would get a negative 15 and 25/100. So the diver that is farther below sea level is negative 15 and 25/100 feet lower in the water. Make sure you're taking these notes and writing down these steps in your book pages because this will help you later. When you're ready, just let this play through and we'll go on to the next set of problems. Okay, on the do you know how and the do you understand questions, what I'm going to do is give you some responses that you can use to help you practice these skills before you get to your Math XL assignment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to try, or you can try on your own, questions 4, 5, and 6. Pause the video and then come back and you can check your answers for those questions. Okay, take a look at those three problems and their answers. You may need to pause the video so that you can check your answers before it goes on to the next page. On this practice and problem solving page, you can try to solve questions 7 through 13. When you're ready, come back here and check your answers. Take a few moments to check your work on questions 7 through 13 before you go on to the next part of your assignment. You can pause the video here while you do that. Now that you've completed your notes for lesson 1-5, your assignment is to complete your 1-5 Math XL in your Pearson account. See me if you need help with any of your work.